Hi everyone. I'm waiting for Hali. Tonight my guest is Hali Schwartz. There she is. Now I'm going to send her an invitation for her to respond. Good evening. There she is,
Hi.
my tech savvy Hali.
I did it. I did it. Here we are.
Hi, this is your first Instagram Live, isn't it?
It is. I've been doing lots of live and lots of teaching on the Zoom platform, but never on Instagram Live. So this is interesting.
Awesome. So welcome, welcome, and thank you so much for accepting my invitation.
My pleasure and my honor.
There's a time difference here. I'm in Istanbul for those who don't know, and it's 8:30 p.m. here, and for Hali, she's in Toronto, and that's 1:30 p.m. But it's
That's
wonderful
right.
that we can connect this way, isn't it?
It really is. The world provides so many opportunities in the midst of it all.
How is the weather over there in Toronto?
Well, we're in the middle of somewhat of a heat wave, so yeah.
I remember Toronto summers were quite sticky.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. July and August, always. Yeah.
In fact, I landed first in August and I thought, oh my God, if this is it, that's wonderful. But of course, I knew there was a heavy winter to
Yeah.
come.
And then October, November
Yeah.
comes and yeah,
But still, like, there's that huge difference of, I'm just letting people trickle in for a few moments.
sure.
In this November, I remember people would still walk around in sandals, and if there was like a hint of sun, people would be out in the patios and still,
Yeah.
with bare legs having their drinks.
Yeah, in this type of climate where you have four seasons, we really take advantage of it. Yeah,
Yeah, you make the most of it,
we
absolutely.
sure
But you
do.
travel
We
a
sure
lot,
do.
don't you? You go to India or all over the world, really.
Yeah, all over the world. Yeah. Mostly India because that's where my mother lives, as you know, because you know my mother
Yes,
very well. So
yes.
mostly India, but other places in the world, a lot of Europe and Caribbean and Asia. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, I wanted to say thank you so much for accepting my invitation. Forgive me,
My
everyone, if I'm
pleasure.
a little bit nervous because, Hallie, yeah, I'm just a little bit excited because Hallie is such a special person to me. Really, I am, yeah.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
I just want to, tell people who may not know you, or maybe they're going to watch later, but they don't know you, a small
Hmm.
introduction of how we know each other very shortly, and then what you do, who you are. And you can also add to that, of course. You'll do
Sure.
that much better than me. But I went back and I thought, I know you for 15 years. I
Yes, it
mean,
is a
does
long
that
time.
sound about right?
It sounds about right. 15 years sounds
I
good.
can't believe it. Yeah,
Yeah.
2005.
Yeah. I was
And
at your 30th birthday party in Toronto,
you
remember?
were at my, yeah, you got me that amethyst necklace.
I did.
Yeah, you've seen quite different sides of me.
I have. I have.
Yeah, you were at my 30th party,
I was.
and I took your first class ever at the Yoga Sanctuary when I was trying to decide which studio to take my YTT at, and it was that
Hmm.
beautiful college and young, huge studio with the big,
Yeah, the Heritage Building. Beautiful building.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it was the 5:30 class, maybe on a Wednesday, if I'm remembering that right, and
You
there you
are.
were, and I had heard of you, and I'm like, okay, I'm sold. I got to do my training here, and the rest is history. You were
Yes.
my teacher, my asana teacher, so to speak. But
Yeah,
then you were also my meditation teacher. I started then taking the restorative YTT with you.
that's right.
And restorative was, not so, well, at least here in Istanbul, it's still not quite understood, I think. But it's this
Hmm.
understated, maybe best kept secret of yoga,
Agreed.
um, right? And then I started joining your satsang groups, and that's where I saw that you were taking these groups to India, and I just wanted to be part of it all. And
Yeah.
you have this beautiful community, beautiful people that are loyal, really loyal followers,
Yes,
students,
I do. I'm very
and
lucky.
you have this way of, telling us and bringing the philosophy, the mythology, the other
Hmm.
aspects of yoga that people are not always introduced to.
Hmm. Hmm.
So your Instagram handle says out South Asian yoga philosophy teacher
Yep.
and author of One Without a Second. You have a book,
Yes,
excuse
I
me,
do. Yeah.
recordings on yoga philosophy, history and asana practice, and international retreats. You want to add anything to that?
Well, I would say that lately the thing that brings me the most joy and happiness are the satsang groups that I have in my home that I've been doing
Hmm.
probably since 2005 or 2006. So it's been just about 15 years that I've been holding these satsangs in my home. And now, of course, on the Zoom
On
platform, just
Zoom.
because
Hmm.
Zoom, because of the current world situation.
Right.
And I think that's the thing that brings me the most joy these days, because it really gives some people a chance to study yoga, not in yoga studio settings, or yoga studio cultures or in the cultures of teacher trainings and things like that, but it gives people a chance to study yoga as lifestyle, and it helps us to approach yoga from our own instincts rather than from like a form, a specific form of the way we usually teach yoga.
Like the
And
yoga
so,
studio, maybe even,
yeah,
right?
just
Hmm.
the way yoga classes are formed, the way yoga culture is at present today is pretty much uniform throughout the world, actually. If you go to different parts of the world, the way in which yoga is disseminated tends to be quite uniform. There's either classes in a yoga studio setting or there's teacher training programs. The satsangs tend to be a little bit outside of
They
those
are.
boxes. Yeah,
They're often
yeah.
done privately, even here,
Yeah, yeah,
hmm
and
as extras.
not so widely advertised. So it's more that people know that I do satsangs, and so they hear from their friends or what have you, and then they join. And satsangs becomes much more of a conversation than it is a course curriculum. And that's the thing that I love the most about it is the conversation. Yeah,
Yeah, even though you're lecturing and you're imparting your big knowledge,
yeah,
still I
yeah.
remember that I could bring anything up in those satsangs and nothing was ridiculed or found
No,
silly. Like it's just everything about being human, right? Everything pertaining to
yeah.
being a human being right now, or always.
Always. And I think that's the reason why, even though it's been taking me so long, it took me probably 13 years to write the first book. And now I'm in year 3 or year 4 of writing the second book, which
You're
is called,
writing another book, aren't
yeah,
you?
yeah, it's called Yoga Philosophy Comes to Life. Yeah, yeah, I'm co-writing it with a student and a friend of mine named Mark Bezpechny. We're
Hmm.
co-writing this book together, and it's all about bringing yoga philosophy into your life. So rather than thinking about yoga as a subject matter to be studied, yoga is being now approached or looked at in this book as being something that's already there within you. It's already
Hmm.
in your life. It's already what you're made of. And so it's just a matter of understanding that and seeing that. So yoga is more of a vision or an experience than it is a topic. But at first we have to teach yoga as if it's a topic, just to kind of introduce people to what the core teachings are, the core concepts are.
That's the thing.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
usually the introduction for a lot of people tends to be yoga studio or even
Hmm.
gyms.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
it's asana and of course inevitably pranayama too, or as you say, pranayam. You don't say
Pranayam.
the A
Yeah.
at the end, yeah.
I tend not to know. Yeah.
So it often starts like that, and then
Hmm.
people say, then they tend to see after they practice for a while and they feel really good. At least this is how it was for me too. There's
Hmm.
more to it. They see there are other aspects. There's a philosophy or there's a way of
Hmm.
living, and that's not always depicted or shown in the studio culture either. Maybe, what do you think?
Yeah.
That's kind of what I
Well, I just
thought.
think I think that it's interesting when you're creating a circumstance whereby people are introduced to yoga in a class setting, like come in for an hour and a half, or come in for 75 minutes, or come in for an hour. You're sort of having to take this very vast topic and shrink it. Of course, you have to shrink it. You don't have a choice. And in the shrinking of it, you're making choices about what it is that you feel you want to introduce to people or show people. And a
Hmm.
lot of that is you're creating a class structure or a course content called a yoga class that is based on A, what you already know about yoga, and
Right.
B, what you feel the society at large is willing to accept about what yoga is. Do you know what I mean? So, and
Totally.
I think we do that with anything. If you go to a jazz concert, you're going to be, you have to know who your audience is, and
There
you
are
also
certain
have to know,
expectations.
yeah, right. And you also have to know what you know, what your capacity is. So you teach what you know, and then you also teach according to the audience. So as people have gotten more experienced and more passionate about the subject of yoga and a little bit more open to hearing what the more expanded aspects of it are, that's where I feel like I come in.
Like you come
Yeah.
in, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
sort of
yeah,
enter stage left, you know?
yeah, yeah. I love that.
Enter stage left. Yeah.
But it's so true. And you have this really unique upbringing as well. Maybe you can tell
Hmm.
our viewers a little bit about that too,
Sure.
how
Sure.
went to Kulu so many times or you spent months there, you would go back and
Yeah.
forth.
Back and
How
forth
did that
mostly.
happen?
Oh my gosh. How much time do we have?
Well, how much really, yeah, it
Yeah,
flies. The time just flies.
it's a long story, but I'll just kind of just put it in a circle so that it doesn't take too long. But
Okay.
when I was about 4 years old, before I was actually going to school full time, that was when my mother met her own teacher. In the Sanskrit language, we call it guru, which is just somebody that teaches you about your own true self. And that's kind of the larger aspect of the yoga tradition, is learning about your true self. So my mother met her own teacher when I was very young, too young to go to school. So she would just kind of pack me up and pack me a lunch, and she would bring me to these yoga lessons,
This was
which were
in
not,
Montreal, right?
yeah, this was in
Hmm.
Montreal, and they weren't asana classes at all, because Hatha Yoga, which includes asana and pranayam, she was already doing that at an official yoga studio in Montreal. But these were what we would call satsangs. And there was a core group of people, maybe between 12 and 20 people, and I was just the 4 year
Wow.
old kid that was there.
Wow.
Yeah, and then of course from that moment onward would begin her journey, my mother's journey. She never left this company of people. She never left this group of people or this way of being or her teacher. And so when I was old enough to be able to travel to India, after she had moved to India when I was quite young, when I was old enough to travel to India, that's when I would start going and
Hmm.
spending lots and lots of time. So months and months at a time, I would be
But at
going
your own
there.
will, right? This
Yeah,
was you wanted to do this,
yeah,
right?
of course.
You got the bug.
Well, at first I wanted to please my mother, you know. I was like, oh, I want to go and be with my mom and please my mom. And then the first time I went, I was about 18. The first time I went in a big way, I was about 18. And it didn't take me long for me to realize that this was the language I wanted to speak, so to speak.
Hmm.
Yeah, and
Hmm.
so I
Hmm.
began to learn the language. I began to literally learn the Sanskrit language, but then I also began to learn the language about what the way in which we describe this human condition and the world in which we live. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Yes.
And then, of course,
That's
at 18, I've been going back ever since then, pretty much almost every year since
every
then.
year.
Yeah,
Hmm.
pretty much every year since then, and doing some very serious studies. But in 1998 or 99, I think it was, that's when I started to offer my teachings to the community, because at around that time, mid 90s, late 90s, here in Toronto, I feel that's when yoga really exploded
I was
into
going to
the
say you
scene. Yeah,
exploded onto the yoga scene in '99, as far as
about
I know, and
99. Yeah.
I met you in 2005.
That's right.
Yeah.
And in 99, that's when, even more, probably 94 or 95, things started to get really popular. Yoga started to get very popular in Toronto, probably even before that in the
Opening
80s.
studios and studios as a business, perhaps,
Yeah,
right?
but before it was lineage studios, where you'd have the Shivananda Center, you'd have the Iyengar Center, the
Iyengar,
Kripalu Center, and then Helen Goldstein, for the first time, she
right?
was one of the pioneers.
Yoga
She opened
studio.
up the yoga studio in Bloor and Spadina, and that was how we started to see the beginning of yoga studios becoming really popular and demanded and longed for in
Absolutely.
our community. Yeah.
But do you think that it's changed? Of course, it's changed. I know it has changed, but do you think it's losing its purity? I mean, you are in a different bubble, but still, when you look at the,
No, it's all one bubble. I don't think about two bubbles anymore. I mean, we're
no?
talking about the teachings of oneness, which are the teachings
Mhm.
that I follow. I used to kind of make those bubbles into two, like
Well,
this is
do you
the
know what I mean though when I
I
say you're in
do.
your own bubble? I don't mean
Yeah.
that in a, you don't know what I'm talking about way, but
Yeah.
just that you maybe you have a different audience or different
You're
demand
right.
for your, more
Yeah.
specific, really niche
Yeah.
audience.
You're right. Actually, you're right. That's a really good definition of bubble. Thank you for that clarification. I do feel, in a way, I'm in a bit of a different niche. I like that word, and that niche is that once I started to be so much involved in teaching yoga history and yoga philosophy and teacher training programs, that's when I realized very slowly, even though I am an asana teacher as well, that's when I realized that that's where my true heart is. So I guess the bubble that
Philosophy.
you're speaking of is the yoga philosophy bubble. And the bubble
Yeah,
seems to be getting
yeah,
bigger and bigger, not just for me, but
it
I think in the
is.
world.
And
Yeah.
also in Turkey, there's a demand. I'm seeing these
Yeah.
people, looking for yoga philosophy courses being taught online, or people who are in the Buddhist approach, they're
Yeah.
teaching. And, it's an Islamic country here, but of
Yeah.
course, there's tons
Hmm.
of, there's a lot of
European
variety as
influence.
well.
Yeah.
There is, but it's still a little bit taboo. Like people still think that, oh, Hinduism, is this Hinduism? Are you worshiping Hinduism or Hindu gods if you're studying yoga? But it doesn't have to be that way.
No, because
Um,
yoga is a philosophy even more than it is a culture and a religion, or at least
right.
every bit as much a philosophy as it is coming from a socio-cultural religious tradition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I did say today in my stories when I was sort of, introducing you in throughout the day that you are someone who is very good at all aspects of yoga. You're an excellent philosophy teacher, but I was saying jokingly, some people you think, they can't be good at everything, but you are good at everything about yoga. Like you are a great asana teacher, you're a great meditation teacher, you speak Sanskrit, you teach Sanskrit,
Yeah.
you chant, you know the philosophy, the mythology. Like I don't know anyone like you. I really don't. But
Thank you
it's
so
true.
much. Thank you.
So I was looking through your blog last night to, find some prompts or maybe things that could
Hmm.
lead to an interesting conversation. And of course, our time is limited. So I liked this sentence that you wrote. It says, "It was not long before I realized that yoga is not something to be learned as much it is a reorientation of the way that you think." Is that like a definition of yoga for you, or not the
Oh my
only, but
gosh. So this is a good place to start, I think, Sinem. Very well chosen. You chose a good sentence from the blog. Thank you for that.
it was
I
well
feel
written.
thanks. I think the reason why I had started the blog in the first place was just to get into a conversation about the way in which we define yoga. And yoga is one of those vast topics that it's
This is what I'm
extremely,
interested in
yeah,
because
it's
it's
very difficult to
changing. That
pinpoint.
definition is
Yeah.
changing.
Yeah, it's very difficult to pinpoint because it's changing all the time. And so you can't put your finger on something that refuses to
And
be
everybody keeps
pinpointed.
saying union, union. Okay, union of breath, union of mind, union of blah blah blah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure that's true, but I'm interested in this
Okay.
definition
So
here.
so let's look at that for a moment and say that before we get any definitions of yoga that start to expand and get more and more humanized, more and more direct,
Hmm.
yoga is just a word, a Sanskrit term that is used to describe a state of awareness or a state of being. Now, that state of awareness, that state of being, it has no word. It's just your own direct experience. But like when you're in love, and then you use the word love, but you were in love whether you had the word love or not. So you're in the state of yoga whether you have the word yoga or not. And this is what I wanted to talk about in my blog, that rather than yoga being a separate something that you learn about, it's really you're learning about your very own being. And in order to learn about your very own being, you have to enter the thinking process. You have to use
Hmm.
this mind in order to do that, because that's the main tool in your toolbox that you're going to be used to kind of loosen up the old things to try to pry them open to see what's underneath.
Mm-hmm,
So,
mm-hmm.
the way we will have to enter into the thinking process and change the way we think, or expand, I should say, the way we think in order for us to realize what's already there. Because the yoga is not somewhere else; it's already there as your own being.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So we have to reorient our thinking in order to make that earth-shattering realization. So that's kind of what it is. It shatters, in a way, it sort of shatters everything, you know?
Yeah, all of your
Yeah,
preconceived notions,
of
your
course.
perspective of,
The way
how
you've been
you've
educated, and
your
yeah,
identity as a person, your attachments
exactly.
to that identity, I guess the ego.
Yeah. And it's not that the yoga is telling you have to somehow get rid of these old notions or these concepts. It's not a matter of getting rid of. My teacher used to always make a joke. If you get rid of your ego, where would you put it? It's not like there's a
You need
place
it
where you're
to
going to then go put
survive.
your, yeah,
Yeah,
you need it
yeah.
to be in this existence. It's a matter of expanding your understanding, of opening and expanding your the capacity of your understanding. And once that understanding starts to open and it becomes more spacious, you start to see what is, as well as seeing what you think is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And how do
yeah.
we get there? Do we do that through meditation, hours and hours of meditation, or satsangs where they're like-minded people and a guide like yourself? I'm just asking for people who may not
Okay,
know,
that's
you know?
a really amazing question, Sanem. Thank you for that. I think that the easiest place to start, and I'm not saying it's the best place to start, I'm just saying it's an available place to start, is to look at the primary source materials, which are the scriptures, that are like accounts of those that have done this work before and have told us about it. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what a scripture is all about. That's what the Upanishads, which are some very important scriptures on the topic of yoga, that's what they talk about. It's somebody's direct experience of having done the work. And
Mm-hmm.
so now me as a reader, I can read about that. But if I read about that, it still stays separate from me as somebody else's experience. So
Right.
it's almost like I start with the scripture in order to get excited, in order to get inspired and motivated. And then if I have the wherewithal, if I have
Mm-hmm.
the courage that it takes, I will go into the laboratory of my own consciousness myself, and I'll make the experiment, and I'll see what I come up with when I go inside my own being,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to potentially have the direct experience of my own true nature. So at first I heard it from an inspiring person. I'm like, I want to see if I can have that experience myself. And then
Right.
that's where meditation is good. That's where satsangs are good. That's where finding a teacher
You
is
you
good.
probably need
Yeah,
community, right? It's hard to do this in isolation because I can imagine that the mind will just take you places and you need to ask your questions, things that come up
that's right.
to
And
someone
mind
who's
is a
gone down that path before.
right on, and mind is habituated to certain patterns of thinking. So left to its own devices, it's always going to default towards its pattern. Whereas satsang, for example, is almost like pattern breaking.
Hmm.
And it happens not just because of the teacher. I don't like to take all the credit. I
No,
feel
I
like
know, I
teachers get
know.
too much credit. It's the community. It's the conversation. It's the direct experience of what's real that creates the transformation. Not this like teacher over here.
Which you
Teacher is just
also
a
experienced in India when you were going every single year, like almost like a refill, right?
yeah, always a refill. Because then when I would go home, I would instantly default back into the old pattern.
How can
And
you not?
how can
Hmm.
you not, Sanem? How can you not?
It's work. It's work.
Yeah,
Like it's
it's work.
consistent. It's a commitment. It's a lifestyle. But then again, like I also think of there's still that other yoga culture too, where it's just physical.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? I mean, is that
Hmm.
I don't know. It's just people start with asana, and now there's Instagram with people posing in these challenging postures, and people have this impression that you need to do perfect split
Yeah.
Hanumanasana to be a yogi. And even though people like us, we talk about it and we say that that's not yoga. I mean, I'm not saying it's not yoga at all, but just shape focused or
Shape focus. Interesting.
externalized and I don't know, all of these things that you're mentioning, the how the mind works, how to master that, or how to discipline it, or even
Hmm.
just meditation, people almost, or there's something that, I wrote this here. How does something that was meant to be so authentic feel so fake these days? Do you ever
Um,
ask yourself that question, or are you
I,
just,
I, I do, but not as much anymore. I went through a
mm,
period in around 2012, and I actually even remember when it was a period of 2012 where I was feeling quite disheartened about the whole thing.
I
Of
thank
course,
you
I
for
don't.
being honest. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah, I don't feel that way so much anymore. And I
Hmm.
think the reason why I don't feel that way anymore is because yoga is way too vast and timeless for it to become affected by the way human beings understand it in whatever era human beings are understanding it. If in the modern era human beings are tending towards understanding yoga as a physical practice, is not going to change the fact that yoga
The essence of
is
it,
the essence of
the
yoga
seed.
is knowing the true self. So it's not like yoga's not getting upset that
It's
people are putting, complex postures on Instagram. It's only human
true.
beings that are getting upset. So the yoga's not changing just because human beings are changing it.
Your own
You
understanding and your,
Yeah.
how do I say this? You're very, I can't find a word because I live in Turkey. I don't think in English. And then when I switch to English, even though I sometimes I can't find words, but you're very based or you're very foundational,
Yeah.
uh, feeling of what yoga is. I guess it's
Yeah.
unwavering maybe, or
It's
something that's
unwavering
not.
now.
Yeah, so
It's not changing with the winds of change. Yoga is not going
right.
to change with it. It will appear to change. It will
That knowledge
seem to
keeps you,
change. No,
yes,
because it's
got it.
formless. The knowledge is formless. It doesn't have a form. You can't change
Hmm.
something that doesn't have a form. You can only change something that does have a form. And that's why asana is so and that's why asana is so popular, because it's a form, it's form based. You do it with your body and it's form based. You can change your bodies into these different shapes. So it's really interesting and really exciting.
Hmm.
And if you remember from yoga philosophy, your koshas, your pancha kosha, your five sheaths, your physical body is the first
First
kosha.
layer.
It's the first layer, it's the first sheath, and I have to understand how it works. I have to I have to deeply improve my connection to and my relationship with this sheath. Now, I don't want to get trapped there and not be able to improve my
Go deeper.
relationships with deeper aspects of myself, but it is in a way the
It's
first
a good
line of
start.
defense. It's a great start.
I think that's why
It is a
the
great start.
Western typical path is we have back pain, we sit in chairs all day. Marley Parker Photos is saying,
I
I
know, I
love that,
saw
Hali.
that.
Yoga is not
Yoga's
getting
not getting
upset.
a hi, Marlene. Nice to see you in this
Yeah.
IG land.
But the typical start is, yeah, we sit in chairs, 21st century lifestyle, and there's back pain. It was that for me as well. I had scoliosis surgery and I had so much scar tissue and pain, and that got me to search for something.
Yeah, right.
Because when you're in physical pain or in discomfort, it's hard to think of enlightenment or, trying to get there. But first, you just need to feel good in your body. So
You're right,
that does
but
make
so,
sense.
yeah,
Hmm.
and you know what? You
But
bring up a really good point. If I can segue a little bit into yoga
please,
philosophy,
please,
that at the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, the main character of the Bhagavad Gita, whose name is Arjun,
Arjun.
is not in physical pain. He's in spiritual and emotional pain. Terrible, terrible spiritual and emotional pain. And so you see, the Hatha Yoga will come along, and it
Mm-hmm.
will address that first kosha, the things that can happen physically to us. And then the other aspects of yoga, like the jnana yoga or the raja yoga, are going to come around and they're going to deal with the subtler aspects of our existence, the less tangible aspects of our existence. So yoga is
Mm-hmm.
so vast and so movable and so formless that
Mm-hmm.
it's going to help you to radically transform whatever it is that is needing to be transformed, whether it's your body or your
Whatever
emotions or your
you
spirit,
need, it will
whatever
address
you
that,
need.
won't
Of
it?
course,
That's
absolutely it
true.
will. Yes.
That's a good point, actually. I'm just saying
Like,
that a lot of people start with the physical aspect, but then it turns out, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it's all done so that you can sit in meditation for long periods of time,
you are
right?
not wrong. You are not wrong. Because when I started to meditate, I had about a 10 and I was young when I started to meditate, supposedly with this
Much
body
younger
that
than
was
all
like,
of
yeah,
us, yeah.
right. I was like maybe 18 when I started to meditate. And now I'm 52, which means that now I can meditate for hours at a time and not have to be agitated in my body because the Hatha yoga practice for me is also so strong
Mm-hmm.
that I have not only do I have body awareness, but my body is not telling me how it feels.
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling my body how I want it to feel. And then it's a relationship between me
Mm.
and my body rather than it being the master of
How
me
do you
or,
mean
you
that
know,
when you say you're telling your body how you want to feel? Like,
well, if my body's feeling restless and agitated and it's saying, Hallie, I'm feeling restless and
oh,
agitated, then
okay.
I'm going to enter into a conversation with my body. I'm going to practice certain aspects of Hatha yoga so that me and my body are now in relationship with each other. And it's not a one-way street where I'm following the dictates of my body, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
And the mind, of course.
And the mind, of course. And then the mind becomes your third kosha, your manomaya kosha, where the mind
Mm-hmm.
is usually dictating everything that you feel and perceive. And instead of that happening in Raja Yoga, we learn how to enter into dialogue or relationship with the mind. So it's not a one-way street anymore. It's
I
it's
love
it's
that.
it's two people in a relationship and they have equal standing with each other. One is not trying to lord over the other. It's a cooperative connection.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
But it takes an enormous amount of practice and especially in child
Dedication. Hmm.
dedication, faith. And how about faith?
You wrote that in your blog too, that
Yeah.
sometimes you didn't want to, but you had to have faith, or I think that there was a sentence like that somewhere, because I just studied it last night, and I don't always have a lot of time,
It's
unfortunately,
okay.
with the babies, but I know you well, and I mean, I think I know your teachings
You
and
do.
who you are at
You
least
do.
well, even though we've been apart for quite some time. Last time I saw you was in Portugal, right
Yeah,
after I got married.
2016.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But in terms of what you're saying, yes, the mind and having a conversation with it, it doesn't feel that way very often. It feels like we're victims, and that it happens, things happen to us.
Hmm.
So that was a good reminder that you
Yeah.
brought that up.
Yeah. And
And do you
this is,
think that, mm,
go ahead, ask a question. I'm
no, I mean,
happy
does
to
that
hear it.
happen in meditation or when you say you're getting into a conversation?
Yes. And I think the
When
reason
does
why
it speak back?
meditation,
In meditation?
very quickly, because it's not mysterious at all. You know that as soon as you sit down and close your eyes to meditate, after you take care of a few little aches and pains and ickiness in the body, the first thing that's going to happen is that the thinking process is going to start up. And you either completely get swallowed up by that thinking process and you can't separate yourself from it, or you begin, or as a maybe as a more seasoned meditator, you actually take the position of being able to watch and notice the thinking process. And as you watch and notice the thinking process, you realize that the thinking process is actually a something, an object that you can enter into a connection with. So it's like the meditator, is observing the thinking process. So the I becomes the observer and the thinking process becomes the object that you're observing.
It's
And then the
something you can.
conversation starts.
And then you can also you also realize that you can separate yourself from that and not have to identify with it, right?
That's right, Sinem. Well said. That's
Hmm.
exactly right. And by separating yourself from it, it means that the one who is the very pure consciousness or the witness consciousness of the thinking process, it's not that it's separate from it. It's just that without the witness, without the pure consciousness or the pure awareness, there is no thinking process. So it's like without the sky, there's the cloud. Where's the cloud going to go if there's
Oh,
no
your
sky,
metaphors. I
right?
love your metaphors.
Well,
We
I wish
seem
I
to
would
have a
have invented
question.
them. Yes.
But you're so good at bringing them up exactly when we need them. Now, Tizian is saying, I have a Bhakti question.
Yes,
In the
please.
Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says to think of him always and offer up everything to him. I
Yep.
can think of Krishna when I'm experiencing deep joy or suffering, but how do we think of him when let me see, trying to see the whole thing, when we are neutral throughout the day?
Okay, wonderful question.
Do you
Thank
want
you
me
so
to read
much
that
for that.
again, or it's
Mhm.
cool?
I think that scripture, yoga scripture, of which, of
Mm-hmm.
course, the Bhagavad Gita is the most famous one. Yoga scripture is usually a way in which we're approaching knowledge from the perspective of needing it. Do you know what I mean? It's like if I need knowledge, the knowledge is there for me. Of course. It's like
Mm-hmm.
if I need
Help.
to have my thirst quenched, the glass of water is there and I just have to drink it. But when I'm not thirsty, I'm not going to drink the water. So the yoga scriptures are actually meant to be there for you in times where you need to really understand and frame your experiences in a way that you can go beyond them, or learn the lessons that you need to learn from them. But in moments when you're already in that space of neutral, in that space of, let's say, evenness or serenity, we would call it the sattva.
Equilibrium.
Yeah, we would call it the
Sattva.
sattva guna. In those times, that's not really where the scripture is meant to be needed for. The scripture is meant to ask, to help you to answer a question that you have about
You're,
why you're experiencing these deep things that you're experiencing, or you're in the conflicts that you're in.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
So I hope that answers the question. I feel like by the time Arjun is in that space of evenness, it's chapter 18, verse 69, I think it is, and the scripture's over. Because there's nothing more to
Wow,
talk about, you know? We
that's
call it Vedant,
mind-blowing.
we call it Vedant philosophy. It's the end of the knowledge, because you've already reached that point where the knowledge is not necessary to be called upon anymore.
I also captured a sentence in your blog. Again, there's so many other places I could have looked at, but like I said, I studied your blog last night about knowledge, that word.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Knowledge doesn't save you in the way you thought it would, when you thought it would, or when you thought it would.
Yeah.
That's
And
that
it's a
that
funny grammatical sentence, that knowledge does not save you in the way you thought it
way you
would
thought it
when you
would,
thought
when you
when you
thought it
thought
would.
it would.
So what about that then?
Yeah.
So because with our Western minds, we
Yeah.
love to categorize, and we think, okay, I'm going to Google something and get knowledge about it. And if we get knowledge, it's going to get better, or the
Yeah.
suffering, or
Well,
even, yeah,
there are certain types of knowledge that will save you. Like, I need to know the recipe for making these muffins, and then
sure.
you make the muffins. You're like, phew, thankfully I know how to make those muffins, and you're sort of saved by not knowing how to make muffins.
Mm-hmm,
That's part of saved. So in some ways, knowledge will fulfill its mandate of saving you
mm-hmm,
from certain inquiries
mm-hmm.
or wanting to know certain things. But self-knowledge,
Yes, Elise. Mm-hmm,
it's a different mandate, because we have this idea that once I acquire self-knowledge, then everything is going to be solved. And I think that we only have that idea before the knowledge comes and solves what it's meant to solve. Once the knowledge comes and solves what it's meant to solve, we realize that everything is exactly the same. So Jack Kornfield said it perfectly, didn't he? After the ecstasy, meaning samadhi, the state of samadhi,
mm-hmm.
after the ecstasy, the laundry. Right? After the ecstasy, the laundry, or after samadhi, the laundry, or the famous Buddhist Zen koan that said, before enlightenment, chop wood, gather water. After enlightenment, chop wood, gather water.
Same, same.
So this
Got
whole
it.
idea that there's going to be an explosion of something. I mean, I guess for some people that's what happens. That feeling of enlightenment sort of feels that way. But what
Mm-hmm,
happens, what I've experienced in my small way, is
mm-hmm,
that once I've reached a certain level of understanding, I realize that my mind doesn't deceive me as much
mm-hmm.
anymore. The deception
Uh-huh.
starts to get finished.
As you say, being duped, right?
Yeah, I don't get duped so much anymore. I mean,
But
I get duped here and there,
every
but
now
not as
and then,
much
yeah,
every now
it's
and then.
human. It's
It's
human, but
human.
then
It's human.
you catch it faster.
Yeah. You
Yeah,
catch it faster. You sure do. Yeah.
that's amazing. Wow. Well, there's so much that we could talk about,
Let's
and
keep going. Let's
yeah,
keep
yeah,
going.
yeah. I mean, I just want to touch upon these things, and of course, people who didn't know Hallie before, you can always go on her website, yogahallie.com,
Sure.
and just see what she has to offer. She has so much to offer. But when you and I were talking, we also mentioned about talking about karma yoga.
Hmm.
Like,
It's one of my
I'll
favorite
admit,
topics.
yeah, please, please. I mean, I think we're just all exposed to the typical, Ashtanga, eight limbs, nothing wrong with that. But,
Of course not.
but how about, yeah, maybe some karma yoga? I looked it up, and the most that understanding I got of it was, what's it called? Again, it's the Turkish word, and what's the English one?
It's okay.
Action, I guess the yoga of action.
Yeah. Uh,
How would you, yeah, just whatever you want to say on
okay.
that.
I think that the way I start when I look at these yoga paths, like karma yoga, I always start with scripture. I don't finish with scripture necessarily, but I always start with scripture.
Mm-hmm.
And the scripture that I usually go to, even though it's not the only one, but that talks about karma yoga, but the scripture that I like to go to is, once again, of course, the one and only Bhagavad Gita,
Bhagavad Gita.
which I think is probably the best primary source material on karma yoga that we have, even though there's plenty
Mm.
of them. And I think the reason why it's so excellent is because the setting of the Bhagavad Gita is so dramatic and so poignant. And
And
it's
yet
something,
relatable.
and so relatable. Somebody doesn't know what to do. Arjun doesn't know what to do. And because he doesn't know what to do, he's in terrible, terrible pain and doubt and fear and confusion because of this not knowing what to do. And so karma yoga comes around in the Bhagavad Gita to solve this problem of, what do I do? Should I stay or should I go? If I
I
stay, there won't be
feel like
trouble.
this
If
every day with my twins. I mean, I don't want to change the topic, but I feel so much of I don't know what to do. Like
yeah,
to sit with those feelings is hard,
yeah, and I think
and
it's
just keep
because
going. Hmm.
well, I think it's because we have this idea, we have this definition of doing that is not how doing is defined in karma yoga. So let me say that again. We have this idea that doing is something, but karma yoga is saying that's not what doing is. Doing is not only what you do. It's the head space, the thinking space, the attitude space that you
Hmm.
bring into the doing. We're trying to find the right thing to do without altering the headspace around the doing. And so therefore it's just a gamble. You're going to Las
Can
Vegas
we
and you're rolling the dice, right?
can we say, well, what comes to mind for me is then intention, energy. Does that work? Does that make sense, or is that more
Um,
than that?
I think those are good words to start with, but if since we only have this conversation to talk about karma yoga, we might as well
Yes.
just go into the depth of it.
And we have
I would,
15 minutes.
and
Yes.
we only have 15 minutes, so I'll try to be as quick as possible.
No, no, no.
When I
Go ahead.
say that the issue with the present way in which we act in this world is that we act completely obsessed with the outcome.
True.
That's the
Oh God.
obsession. The obsession is the outcome
That
of the
sums
action.
everything up. Oh
Yeah,
God.
it does. And it's an obsession, and by obsession I mean it's just a human drive to be
The
obsessed with an
fruit.
outcome, the fruit. Karma phala, we call it, phala, karma phala. We're obsessed with the fruit. And even though we know rationally that the fruit of the action doesn't exist in the present moment, it only exists in the future time, which when it arrives will be the present moment. So rationally, we know that there's no point in being obsessed over the fruit, but yet we can't help it because it's a human
Oh,
drive
it's
to be
so
obsessed
human.
over the
Yes.
fruit. Yeah. Now, imagine if we were able to somehow use our wisdom, our skill, our wisdom in order to circumvent that human drive that tends to be extremely obsessed with outcomes.
Hmm.
And imagine if we could take that commitment, that obsessive commitment, and actually bring the commitment into the action itself.
Oh,
So reserve that obsession for the action and
the
not for the
energy.
yeah, yeah,
I.
to
Oh,
preserve that precious energy for the action itself. rather than
Mm-hmm.
for the outcome of it. But of
Wow.
course, that means circumventing the human condition, which is so hard to
Super
do.
hard. It could be like a
Yeah,
lifelong
yeah.
pursuit, no?
Lifelong, not no, yes, 100%. Yeah.
So how for
Well,
those who
those that
don't
are
know,
well, there are several ways, and let's just talk about two ways. One is easier than the second, so we'll start with the easier way first. I think
excuse
the
me.
easiest way to just begin to circumvent that human obsession we have with the future, and with the idea that you can control the future, is to start with really simple things like the things you do every day, like grocery shopping, like cooking food, like going to work. And, if I'm on the streetcar and I'm already terrified of being late for work for some accident on the road that hasn't happened, but I'm imagining that it's going to happen and it's going to make me late. Do you
Oh
see?
God.
You see what the mind
Oh
does?
yeah. Oh yeah.
There's
Oh
not
yeah.
even any traffic, but I'm worried that the traffic is going to
Oh
make me late. So
yes.
if we can start using our rational mind going, but wait, that's just my imagination talking. I don't have even any evidence that I'm going to be late, but yet I'm fabricating this late
Before you get
scenario.
into
And
the spiral
exactly,
of,
before you go into the
woo,
spiral,
vortex
you
or
go
yeah.
into that meditative state of watchfulness.
And
It's
that
that's
happens because you have this practice of meditation. It
That's
doesn't just
right.
happen overnight,
No,
right?
it doesn't just happen overnight. You have to go through the
Hmm.
fire in order to
So
do this work.
discernment, pausing, and using your
Yes,
rational mind
beautiful, Sanem.
to
Exactly right.
uh,
And the other way, which is much harder, or the bhakti yogis would say that it's much easier. Somebody had just asked the bhakti yoga question. The bhakti yogis would say this is much easier. You and I would say it's much harder. The bhakti yogis would say, why don't you just have perfect faith? Just have perfect faith. Just have
faith
faith.
and devotion.
Just have faith in and if you are a person that has a relationship to religious life and God is in your heart and in your vocabulary, you could say have perfect faith and surrender it all to that absolute divine. Or if that's not in your vocabulary, you can say have perfect faith that the unfoldment process of what is underway, and that if I interrupt that in unfoldment, then I cut myself off from the way in which the
So
universe is already moving.
this seems to contain an element of surrender, right?
Yes.
And I was going to say something else, but of course I forgot.
But you said
But
surrender, and you could just stop there because that's what it
surrender
is.
and something about you said if you have religion or a relationship to that. Yeah, you're
To
right. I
the
could stop there, but
yeah.
yeah, I'll
If you
I'll
have
let
a
you know.
relationship to
Mm.
divinity or to religion, then the bhakti yogis would say it's very easy if you just give it to God.
Just surrender. And
So
also, I
Krishna's
was going to ask you. Sorry.
not at all. Krishna says
Just
to Arjun, and then we'll pick it up from what you were going to say. Krishna says to Arjun, "Give it to me, capital M. Give it to me and be free." But
oh,
you're so obsessed with this idea that you control everything, and this is why you suffer in your actions. Is because you're obsessed with the idea that you control everything, and you don't control everything. The only thing you can control is your action in the present moment. There's nothing else that you can control. And this is karma yoga.
uh-huh.
Now just try to practice it for a few hours.
Oh my goodness.
You'd rather go to a vinyasa class and sweat buckets and stand on your head for 20 minutes. It's harder to practice karma yoga than
So
that.
this also brings to mind, okay, first surrender, but the other thing that it brings to mind for me is, this new age verbal or verbiage flying around, be positive, good vibes only, or, and okay, okay, I'm going to stop being sarcastic, but optimism. I mean, having genuine positive feelings. How is this different than that,
The
than the
good
good vibes
question. I
only
love that.
culture?
Sunem, very nice. That's a great question. I love
Well, I have a
that.
good teacher.
Thank
And
you.
by the way, if anyone has questions, we still have some time. You can type them and I'll try to read them to
Minutes.
Hallie. But yeah, how is it different than,
Um,
blind optimism?
okay, thank you. I
Because then
think
the
that's an
mind likes to
important one.
argue with that optimism too. The mind again gets there and
Okay,
starts
so
to argue.
let me answer the way I feel, well, to the best of my ability. So we have something in yoga philosophy. It's something in life, but let's just say yoga philosophy calls it the dvandvas, the pairs of opposites. So the pairs of opposites are constantly playing with each other, but play in opposition to each other. So an example of a pair of opposites would be positive and negative. Of course, it's just a classic example, which means that if I'm living in this realm of pairs of opposites, then I'm going to try to counteract all the negative stuff, or what I call the negative stuff, with the positive stuff. And then the more I counteract the negative with the positive, the more I create an attachment to the positive. And then when the negative comes, I somehow feel betrayed.
I don't like you.
But I was positive. Why did this negative thing come? But what's happening in yoga philosophy is something completely different. Krishna is telling Arjun, you have to be beyond the pairs of opposites. Only when you're beyond the pairs of opposites will you be able to see actually what truly is. So for me, when I think about karma yoga, I don't think about it as the positive answer to the negative situation. I think about it as neither positive nor negative.
Non-dual.
Yeah,
non-duality.
It's just is. And what is not positive or negative.
But there's a devotion, there's a surrender.
Once I
Patience.
know this, there's a discernment. There's a discernment. If I know that my mind is constantly going to the negative, the reason why I introduce the positive is just to tip the scale to even it. Once I've tipped the scale to even it, I'm not going to bounce over to my attachment to the positive, because then I'm back in trouble again.
You're back in trouble again.
I'm back in trouble again. I'm only using the positive to tip the scales back to the center.
Okay.
And then if I'm going to be attached to anything, I'm going to be attached to the center.
This is different than
that's where my attachment is going to go. Yeah. If I was going to be attached to anything, it's going to be that evenness. Yeah.
Okay.
And even that, eventually, the expert yogis are saying, eventually you'll even have to give up that.
That's no fun. They just make everything so hard. They make everything so hard.
Yeah.
So there's practice, there's devotion, there's lots of awareness there. And because the word is karma, or your more beautiful pronunciation, karma. I can't even do it. But yeah, a little bit. So that implies action. The action is this discernment, or is there, like you said, every day
implies the action and the result that is contained in the action. And if I'm not a karma yogi, I will be bound by those results, which means that I'm bound to pay the debts of those results until I add the yoga to the karma yoga. Which means that if I plant this seed in the ground and it's in my backyard and I live in that house, I am bound by whatever is going to sprout out of that garden. That's called the karmic bondage, if you will. And so how about, instead of, karma yoga saying through these skills that you adopt, through practice, through these skills that you adopt, the results of the actions do not create any bondage for you, so that the patterns that you keep on repeating over and over again become broken. Karma yoga is pattern breaking. That's the purpose of it. That's the purpose of it. And
wouldn't that be amazing to, break the patterns, the negative one? Well, again, I'm going into the negative, positive.
The negative ones first.
But the positive ones cause suffering too, because then you're afraid of losing them.
That's right, Sanem. Very well said.
And you can't enjoy the moment.
That very well said. Very well said. So a good way of practicing it, Sanem, and I know we only have 5 more minutes left.
Please tell me.
Is that when people heap their praise on me, Hali, you're so amazing, and Hali, you're such a beautiful philosophy teacher, and Hali,
which she is.
Thank you, and I appreciate it. I take it in like an inhale, all that love and appreciation, and on the very next exhale, I let it go. Because if I only take that in and I don't know how to let it go, then I become bound by my ego to needing praise.
That is so true.
Right? And to only doing actions because they give me praise. I'm like, I'm not going to do that action if it doesn't give me praise. I only do actions that give me praise. You see, that's a pattern. That's a bondage.
It's problematic. It's a bondage. And also for you, it's not that feeling of liberation that you're looking for. That's why probably money is not enough to make one happy, right? Because then you're afraid of losing it. And I mean, that's just one other example. But
Well, yeah,
this inner peace that you could possibly get from this devotion, this lifelong path, is
yeah.
probably much more fulfilling than any physical
And
attainment.
but it's also not a reward. That's why I say it doesn't save you. It's not a reward. It's not somebody
Yeah,
clapping and saying, "Well done, good for you." It has nothing to do with that. It's not a reward.
such a
It's
good
just
point.
it's a dropping into what is, and what is has no
Uh-huh.
quality or qualification. It's just is.
Why aren't more people,
Why aren't more
what,
people?
God,
Yeah.
why are we all so lost? That's why
Well,
we have satsang, of
that's
course.
the next question. That's the next question that we'll do in the next conversation.
Elvandra, merhaba. Would you ever want to, come on another time, whenever it's good for you? This is
Sure.
just not enough. I mean, I
Sure.
know
No, no,
the
it's
thing
not
is, I
enough.
can't join your satsangs. I just can't right now.
What, you
I
can't come at 3:30 in the morning to my satsangs, Hanan? What's the matter with you?
I've done that once. Yes, I've done that once. Oh, and the currency here is just so brutal. It really is. But yes, there was one time where there was an available
Yeah,
satsang, and I stayed up until 3 a.m. in the morning just to
I
join
know. It's
Hali.
amazing.
Evancı merhaba. I have a few Turkish friends also here and yoga
Hi.
teachers.
Hi.
Müge from, I think, Florida or Miami. She lives
Me.
somewhere really warm. Any questions? We have just maybe 2, 3 minutes because Instagram tends to give like 30 seconds left, and then I hate
And then
wrapping
that's
it
it.
up
And
like
then
that.
it's like, goodbye.
Oh. Any questions, anybody? I also just saw Cynthia, Cynthia from India. Is she still
Mm,
here? I don't know, but hi, Cynthia.
mm.
But yeah, the if we get anything, I'll interrupt myself. But yeah, what a pursuit.
It's a
What a
pursuit.
pursuit.
But so maybe just until we get a question. Oh, thank you. Nice to
Sure.
see you, Cynthia. Until we get a question, I would say that my whole idea of living the spiritual life in this last 10 years, it's not what I thought it was when I was in my 20s and my 30s. It's just not what I thought it was.
No, you
It's,
did say in your
yeah,
writing that it was first ticking a box, like this is cool. It makes me
yeah,
stand out. But
yeah,
it's not
that's
about
right.
that at all anymore, is it?
No, no. I mean, it's not a calling card for me anymore. It's just a way of seeing, so that the way in which I see will always direct me back to me, real me.
Wow, what a
Yeah.
gift. Do you feel lucky?
Yes, but at the same time, I'm not going to grab that either. I'm not going to grab it
See,
either.
okay,
Because
I'm
if I
just
grab it,
using
I'm in
trick
trouble.
questions.
Yeah,
No,
I'm
you're
not going to
so
grab it.
right. Wow, I learned a lot. Like I remembered, because a lot of my life right now with motherhood is, yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of I can't be attached to the results, the fruits of my actions.
Which as
Wow,
a mother, that's the
I'm
hardest
getting,
arena to practice in, you know.
I'm really getting a teaching like every day, like a hammer hitting my head. Have you
Yeah.
not learned today? Then we'll get another teaching today.
Me
So,
too, Sanem, me too. It's very easy to speak to knowledgeable people, like I'm knowledgeable about yoga philosophy, and to somehow
hmm
separate yourself from them, like she got it and she gets it and I don't get it. But I feel that's also a bit of a misunderstanding about what
You're
yoga
so
is. There
right.
is no me to get it and you not to get it. So I don't even do that so
It's
much
such a
anymore.
human, it's so human. It's the human condition.
It is. Yeah.
And we're always seeking and searching and working on it.
I'm working on it.
So everybody watching, you can see that it's a little bit more than just asana and pranayam, right? Even though that's a nice start.
Asana and pranayama is magnificent. I do it every day.
Yes, yes, and
Yeah.
meditation.
And
But why
yes.
do we do it? Why do we do it? Why? And again, why do we do it, but not expecting a certain result?
Well, that was a good quality. And since it's 2:30 and we're going to get cut off any second, I would say
hmm
the reason why we do it is because we're trying to shine the radiance of awareness back into our original being.
Because I think we all know that it's not supposed to be this way, right?
Yeah,
Like that
we have an
suffering,
inkling. We do. We have an
right?
inkling that that it's not so much the suffering that's not supposed to be, it's the ignorance. You know, in yoga philosophy, suffering is a drag and no one wants it, but the real drag is the ignorance of your true self.
So true.
And that's what we would say avidya is the word we use in Sanskrit, avidya, to not know your true self. This is the problem that has to be solved.
Wow. Hali, thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
We could have gone easily for another hour,
We
and I
sure
missed
could.
talking to you so much. And I'm so glad that I also feel like, oh, I get what she's saying. So you're such a good teacher. Even though the years have gone by, the seed is still
We're
there.
always connected, Sanem. Always, always.
Thank you so much for your time, Hali.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Marley. We said
Thank
that
you
at the
for
same
everybody
time.
who was
Yeah.
here to listen, participate. This will be available on my IGTV, so you can always, watch the whole recording there. And if you have any questions, you can tag Hali and ask her, and I'll make sure she gets it.
Okay.
Thank you. 20
Thank
seconds. Any last words?
Oh, any
Thank you.
last words? Sanem, I love you and I miss you.
So do
And
I.
you just keep going, keep doing what you're doing.
Thank
Okay,
you,
honey?
Elvan.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Have a great, great evening. Oh, afternoon for you.
Yeah.
Love you.